The leather bindings cut into Seraphine Marlowe's wrists as the wagon jolted over another rut in the muddy road, and she wondered if her captors would kill her before they reached the border fort, or simply let her starve. She had been traveling for 6 days now, bound and caged like livestock, her green skin marked with bruises from the rough handling of the slavers who had raided her village. The other orc women who had been captured with her had already been sold off at various frontier outposts, their cries still echoing in Seraphine's memory as they were dragged away by men with cruel eyes and crueler intentions. Now she alone remained, the last piece of merchandise in a caravan that stank of sweat and desperation. The wagon master, a gap-toothed human with breath like rotten meat, had told her she was bound for the northern territories, where orc slaves fetched high prices from wealthy landowners who needed strong backs for their farms. Seraphine had bitten back the urge to spit in his face. Her mother had taught her that dignity was the one thing no one could take from you, not even in chains. So she sat with her spine straight despite the pain, her small tusks pressed firmly together, and her dark eyes fixed on the horizon where storm clouds gathered like an army. The fort came into view as the sun began its descent toward evening. It was a modest structure, more of a way station than a true military installation, built from rough-hewn timber and crowned with a watchtower that leaned slightly to the east. A wooden palisade surrounded the compound, and Seraphine could see figures moving along the ramparts. Her heart sank. This would be where they processed her papers, where she would officially become property rather than a person. The thought made bile rise in her throat. The wagon creaked to a halt before the main gate. The driver jumped down with a grunt and approached the small window cut into the fortified entrance. Seraphine could hear voices but could not make out the words. Minutes passed. The other slavers in the caravan grew restless, muttering among themselves and casting glances at the darkening sky. Rain was coming, and no one wanted to be caught on the open road when it arrived. Finally, the gate opened just wide enough for a man to step through. Seraphine studied him carefully, cataloging details that might prove useful if an opportunity for escape presented itself. He was tall, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of weathered steel. His clothing marked him as the fort's commander, or at least someone of authority, a simple leather doublet worn over a linen shirt, trousers tucked into well-made boots. But what struck Seraphine most was his expression. There was no cruelty in his face, no anticipation of profit or pleasure. Instead, he looked tired, as though he carried a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. "Papers," he said, his voice level and businesslike. The wagon master scurried forward, producing a rolled parchment from inside his coat. The man, Seraphine would later learn his name was Samuel Morgan, unrolled it and read slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he looked up at the wagon, his gaze finding Seraphine among the shadows. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that Seraphine could not name. It was not pity precisely, though there was compassion in his look. It was more like recognition, as if he saw not a piece of cargo but a person with thoughts and feelings and a will of her own. The moment stretched, and then Samuel rolled up the papers and turned back to the wagon master. "The processing fee has increased," he said flatly. "What? That is robbery." The wagon master's face flushed red. "We have been using this route for months, new regulations," Samuel replied, though Seraphine suspected he was lying. 20 silver pieces to pass through with slave cargo." 20. That is half my profit margin, Samuel shrugged. "Then you are welcome to take the long road around. Should only add another week to your journey, assuming the autumn rains do not wash out the northern pass." The wagon master spat onto the ground and cursed. The other slavers gathered around him, arguing in heated whispers. Seraphine watched Samuel carefully. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unchanged, but she noticed the way his fingers tapped against his forearm, a nervous habit perhaps, or a sign of inner conflict. After several minutes of debate, the wagon master threw up his hands. "Fine. 20 silver, you thieving bastard, but mark my words, I will be reporting this to the territorial governor." "As is your right," Samuel said mildly. The transaction was completed, coins changing hands with obvious reluctance. Then Samuel gestured toward the gate. "Bring the prisoner inside. She will need to be examined and her documentation verified before you can continue north." "Examined? This is more delay. Standard procedure." Samuel's voice hardened slightly. "Unless you would prefer to explain to the authorities why you tried to smuggle undocumented cargo across the border." The wagon master muttered something unflattering, but complied. 2 of his men unlocked Seraphine's cage and hauled her out roughly, their hands gripping her arms hard enough to leave new bruises. She stumbled but caught herself, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. They marched her through the gate into the fort's courtyard. Inside, the compound was sparse but well maintained. A stable stood to the left, a barracks to the right, and a modest house that likely served as both command post and living quarters directly ahead. A few soldiers watched from the shadows, but they made no move to interfere. Samuel led the group toward the house, climbing the 3 steps to the porch and pushing open the door. "Wait here," he instructed the slavers, then to Seraphine, "You inside." She had no choice but to obey. The slavers released her arms and she walked through the doorway, her bound wrists held before her. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with a stone fireplace, several chairs arranged around a worn table, and shelves lined with books. A lamp burned low on the mantel, casting warm light across the wooden floorboards. Samuel closed the door behind them and turned the lock. The sound of the bolt sliding home made Seraphine's pulse quicken. She was alone with a strange human in a locked room, still bound and defenseless. Every instinct screamed danger, but Samuel made no threatening move. Instead, he walked to a cabinet, withdrew a knife, and returned to stand before her. "I am going to cut your bindings," he said quietly. "Please do not try to run. There is nowhere to go, and if you bolt out that door, those men will catch you before you reach the gate." Seraphine said nothing, merely watched him with wary eyes. Samuel took her silence as consent and carefully sliced through the leather straps around her wrists. Blood rushed back into her hands, bringing pins and needles that made her gasp. She rubbed her wrists gingerly, the skin raw and bleeding in places where the bindings had cut deepest. "Sit," Samuel said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "I will get water and bandages." "Why?" The word came out harsher than Seraphine intended, but she was too exhausted and confused to moderate her tone. "What difference does it make if I am injured? I am just cargo." Samuel paused in the doorway to the back room, his shoulders tense. "You are not cargo. You are a person and you are hurt." Then he disappeared through the doorway. Seraphine remained standing for a moment, testing her legs and assessing her situation. The windows were shuttered and likely barred. The door was locked and guarded by the slavers outside. Even if she overcame Samuel, which seemed unlikely given her weakened state, she would not make it past the gate. Escape was impossible, at least for now. She sat down, the chair creaking under her weight, and waited. Samuel returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a small jar of something that smelled like herbs and honey. He set them on the table and pulled another chair close, sitting so they were face to face. "May I?" he asked, reaching for her wrists. The question surprised her. When was the last time someone had asked her permission for anything? She extended her hand slowly, and Samuel began to clean the wounds with gentle efficiency. His touch was careful, almost reverent, as if he feared causing her more pain. The warm water stung, but Seraphine bit back any sound of discomfort. "What is your name?" Samuel asked as he worked. "Seraphine." "That is beautiful. I am Samuel, Samuel Morgan." He glanced up briefly, his gray eyes searching hers. "Seraphine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you have family who would pay for your freedom?" Hope flared in her chest, bright and terrible. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I might be able to help you, but I need to understand your situation first." Seraphine's mind raced. Was this a trick? Some cruel game the humans played to torment their prisoners? But something in Samuel's manner suggested sincerity. She decided to risk the truth. "My father was chieftain of our village before he died last winter. My mother remarried and her new husband has no love for me. I have 2 younger brothers, but they are still children. I doubt anyone would ransom me." "What about a dowry? Do orc women carry dowries?" "Yes," Seraphine said slowly. "When I was betrothed 3 years ago, my father set aside gold and silver for my marriage. The betrothal was broken after his death, but the dowry should still be held by the clan elders." "Why?" Samuel finished bandaging her wrists and sat back. His expression was troubled, conflict written plainly across his features. "Those men outside are slavers of the worst kind. They will take you north and sell you to someone who will work you until you die or worse. I cannot stop them legally. Their papers are in order, and I have no authority to confiscate property without cause." "Then why did you bring me in here?" "Because I wanted to give you a choice." Samuel stood and paced to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. "If you have the means to buy your freedom, I will send word to your clan. I will delay these men as long as I can, and if your people can deliver the ransom before they leave, I will see you released. And if they cannot, or will not—" He turned to face her, and Seraphine saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was determination, fierce and uncompromising. "Then I will find another way, I swear it." "Why?" The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. "Why do you care what happens to me?" "You do not know me. I am an orc and you are human. My people and yours have been enemies for generations." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. "Because I have seen too much cruelty in this world and I am tired of looking away. Because every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of people I could have helped but did not. Because you deserve better than this, Seraphine, and if I have any power to change your fate, then I must try. That is all the reason I need." Tears pricked at Seraphine's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, not here, not in front of this strange human who spoke of kindness and mercy as if they were simple things. "The dowry is hidden in my village," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "It is buried beneath the hearthstone of my father's old house. There are 30 gold crowns and twice that in silver. It is yours if you can get me home." "It is not mine," Samuel corrected gently. "It is yours. I want nothing from you except the knowledge that you are safe and free." "That makes no sense. You could keep the gold for yourself. Who would stop you?" "My conscience," he said simply. "Now, write down directions to your village and any message you want sent to your people. I have a rider I trust who can reach them within 2 days if the weather holds." Seraphine did as he asked, her hands shaking as she scratched words onto parchment with a quill that felt foreign and awkward in her grip. Orcs did not write often, preferring oral traditions, but her father had insisted she learn the human script for purposes of trade. She wrote to her brothers, explaining her situation and begging them to retrieve the dowry and bring it to the fort. She included the location of the hiding place and a phrase only they would know, a secret their father had shared before his death, to prove the message was genuine. When she finished, Samuel took the letter and sealed it with wax. "I will send this tonight. In the meantime, you will have to return to the wagon, but I will do everything in my power to stall your departure. How long can you keep them here? 3 days, maybe 4 if I am creative. After that, they will grow suspicious and demand to leave, regulations or not. 4 days. It seemed both an eternity and not nearly long enough. Seraphine nodded, accepting the reality of her situation. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling insufficient for the gift he was offering her. Samuel smiled, and it transformed his face, chasing away the weariness and revealing a man who might once have been carefree. "Do not thank me yet. We have a long road ahead, and many things could go wrong." He unlocked the door and called for the slavers. They came quickly, eager to be back on the road, but Samuel informed them that the verification process would take several days due to discrepancies in the paperwork. The wagon master raged and threatened, but Samuel remained unmoved, citing territorial law and the penalties for transporting improperly documented cargo. Eventually, the slavers had no choice but to accept the delay. They were granted permission to camp in the fort's courtyard, and Seraphine was returned to her cage. That night, as rain began to fall in earnest, Seraphine lay on the thin blanket that served as her bedding and thought about Samuel Morgan. He was an enigma, a human who defied everything she had been taught about his kind. Her people said humans were greedy, violent, and treacherous. Yet Samuel had shown her more kindness in one evening than her own clan had in the month since her father's death. It made her question things she had always accepted as truth, and that was a dangerous thing. The next 2 days passed in agonizing slowness. Samuel appeared periodically to check on her, always with some excuse about additional documentation or security protocols. He brought her food that was far better than the slop the slavers provided: fresh bread and cheese, and even a portion of roasted meat that made her mouth water. They spoke in brief snatches, careful conversations that never ventured too close to anything personal. But Seraphine found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that confused her. On the 3rd day, a rider arrived at the fort, mud-splattered and exhausted. Seraphine's heart leapt when she saw Samuel speaking with him urgently near the gate. Could it be her brothers? Had they come with the ransom? But when Samuel approached her cage afterward, his expression was grim. "Your brothers received the message," he said quietly, crouching beside the wooden bars so their conversation would not carry to the sleeping slavers. "But there is a problem. Your stepfather has claimed the dowry as his own and refuses to release it. Your brothers are trying to negotiate with the clan elders, but it will take time." Despair crashed over Seraphine like a wave. Of course her stepfather would interfere. He had always resented her, the daughter of his predecessor, a living reminder that he was not the clan's first choice. How much time? At least another week, possibly more. The elders must convene and hear arguments from both sides. It is Orc law, apparently. A week. Seraphine closed her eyes. The slavers will never wait that long. "No," Samuel agreed. "They are already demanding to leave. I have pushed them as far as I can without raising suspicion. Tomorrow I will have to let them go." Then this was all for nothing. Bitterness edged her words. "I will die in chains in the north, and you will have wasted your efforts on a lost cause." "Not nothing," Samuel said firmly. He reached through the bars and took her hand, his skin warm against hers. "And I have not given up. There is still one option." "What option?" He hesitated, and Seraphine saw doubt flicker across his face. "I could buy your freedom myself. I have some savings, Not the full amount of your dowry, but perhaps enough to convince the wagon master to sell. He is a greedy man, and he has already spent days here without profit. He might be willing to cut his losses. And then what? I would be your slave instead of his." "No," Samuel said sharply. "You would be free. I would give you the manumission papers immediately. You could go wherever you wanted, do whatever you chose." Seraphine stared at him, trying to understand. "Why would you spend your savings on a stranger? This makes no sense, Samuel." "Because it is the right thing to do." "That is not a reason. People do not bankrupt themselves for strangers because it is right. There must be something else. What do you want from me?" Samuel's hand tightened on hers. "Nothing." "I want nothing from you except the chance to undo a small piece of the injustice in this world. Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," Seraphine whispered, "because no one has ever done something for me without expecting something in return. Then let me be the first." He released her hand and stood brushing mud from his knees. "I will make the offer tomorrow morning. If the wagon master accepts, you will be free by noon. If he refuses—" He trailed off, but they both knew what would happen. "Try to get some sleep. Whatever comes, you will need your strength." Seraphine watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight. She lay back down, but sleep was impossible. Her mind churned with questions and possibilities, hope and fear battling for dominance in her chest. Could this actually work? Could she truly go from slave to free woman in a matter of hours? And if she did, what then? Where would she go? Her village had cast her out through inaction, and she had no trade or skill to sustain herself in the human lands. Freedom might simply be another form of doom, slower, but just as certain. But perhaps that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, she would allow herself to hope. Morning came cold and gray, the rain having given way to a chilly mist that clung to the ground like a living thing. The slavers broke their fast with hard bread and sour beer, eager to be away from the fort and its bureaucratic delays. Seraphine sat in her cage, her body tense with anticipation, and watched the door of Samuel's house. He emerged just as the wagon master was hitching the horses to their harnesses. Samuel approached him directly, no preamble or small talk, and Seraphine saw him gesture toward her cage. The wagon master's expression shifted from irritation to interest, and they began to negotiate in earnest. The discussion lasted nearly an hour. At times, voices were raised, and Seraphine feared the deal would fall through. But Samuel was patient, methodical, wearing down the wagon master's objections one by one. Finally, Samuel produced a leather purse and counted out coins into the other man's palm. The wagon master bit each one to test its authenticity, then nodded sharply. They shook hands, and the wagon master called to his men to open Seraphine's cage. "You are sold," he announced with evident relief. "The fort commander has purchased you. Do not make him regret his generosity." They hauled her out and transferred her bonds to Samuel, who accepted the chain attached to the collar around her neck with a look of distaste. The wagon master wasted no time, climbing onto his seat and snapping the reins. Within minutes, the slavers' caravan was disappearing down the muddy road, leaving Seraphine alone with Samuel and the handful of soldiers who manned the fort. Samuel immediately unlocked the collar and let it fall to the ground. "You are free," he said, producing a rolled parchment from inside his coat. "These are your manumission papers, signed and sealed. Legally, you are no longer anyone's property. You are your own person." Seraphine took the papers with numb fingers, hardly daring to believe it was real. She unrolled the document and scanned the words, written in the formal language of human law. It was all there, just as he had promised. She was free. "I do not understand you," she said, her voice breaking. "I do not understand why you would do this." Samuel smiled that same tired smile. You do not have to understand. You just have to accept it and decide what comes next. What comes next? Seraphine repeated slowly. The question felt enormous, impossible to answer. She had spent so long focused on survival that she had forgotten what it meant to make choices for herself. I have nowhere to go. My village is closed to me and I know nothing of the human world. You could stay here, Samuel offered. At least for a while, until you figure things out. The fort always needs extra hands and I could use help with the accounts and inventory. It is not glamorous work, but it is honest and you would have a roof over your head and food in your belly. You are offering me employment, after spending your savings to free me. I am offering you an option. You are under no obligation to accept. If you would rather leave and make your own way, I will understand. Seraphine looked around the fort, taking in the simple buildings and the quiet efficiency of the soldiers going about their morning duties. It was not home, but it was safe, and safety was something she had not known in a very long time. I will stay, she said finally, for now at least, until I can repay you for what you have spent on my freedom. There is no debt, Samuel insisted, but Seraphine cut him off with a sharp gesture. There is always a debt. I do not accept charity, Samuel Morgan. If I stay here, I will work for my keep and I will find a way to pay you back every copper coin you spent. That is not negotiable. For a moment she thought he might argue, but then he nodded. Fair enough. We will call it employment then, not charity. Come, I will show you where you can sleep and get you some proper clothes. Those rags are falling apart. He led her to a small building adjacent to the barracks, a storage room that had been converted into rough living quarters. It contained a narrow bed, a chest for belongings, and a washstand with a cracked mirror. To Seraphine, who had spent the last week in a cage, it looked like a palace. It is not much, Samuel said apologetically, but it is clean and dry. I will have one of the men bring fresh linens and clothing. Take the day to rest and recover. We can discuss your duties tomorrow. Thank you, Seraphine said, and this time the words felt adequate, heavy with meaning and gratitude. Samuel nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Seraphine stood alone in the tiny room and, for the first time since her capture, allowed herself to cry. Great heaving sobs shook her body, releasing weeks of terror and grief and exhaustion. She cried for her father, who would never see her free. She cried for her brothers, fighting a battle they might never win. She cried for herself, for the life she had lost and the uncertain future ahead. And when the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter, as if some burden had been lifted from her soul. She washed her face in the basin, the cold water bracing, and examined her reflection in the mirror. Her green skin was marred with bruises, her dark hair matted and filthy, her tusks chipped from where a slaver had struck her. She looked like a survivor, someone who had endured hell and emerged on the other side. It was not pretty, but it was honest, and there was strength in that. A knock came at the door, and a young soldier entered carrying an armload of clothing and linens. He looked nervous, his eyes darting everywhere except directly at Seraphine, as if he feared she might attack him. "Commander Morgan sent these, miss," he stammered, dropping the bundle on the bed and retreating quickly. "Thank you," Seraphine called after him, but he was already gone, the door clicking shut behind him. She sorted through the clothes, finding trousers, shirts, a warm cloak, and even undergarments, all in sizes that would fit her larger frame. Samuel had been thoughtful, choosing practical garments rather than dresses or other impractical human fashions. She changed gratefully, discarding the torn and filthy rags she had worn for so long, and then set about making the bed with the fresh linens. When everything was arranged to her satisfaction, Seraphine lay down and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, She felt safe, truly safe, and sleep claimed her almost instantly. She woke to darkness and the sound of rain drumming on the roof. For a moment, disorientation gripped her and she reached instinctively for the bars of her cage. But her hands met only air and memory returned. She was free. She was safe. She was in Samuel's fort. A soft glow of lamplight showed beneath her door, and Seraphine realized someone had left a light burning in the corridor outside. It was a small kindness, but it warmed her nonetheless. She rose and splashed water on her face, then ventured outside. The fort was quiet, most of its inhabitants already asleep. Seraphine wandered across the courtyard, her bare feet silent on the wet stones, and found herself drawn to the house she had entered on her first night. Light showed in the windows, and through a gap in the shutters, she could see Samuel sitting at his table surrounded by ledgers and papers. She knocked softly, and he looked up, surprise crossing his face. "Seraphine, is everything all right?" "Yes, I could not sleep. May I come in?" "Of course." He stood and opened the door wide, gesturing her inside. "I have tea if you would like some." "Tea sounds good." Samuel busied himself at the fireplace, heating water in a battered kettle and measuring out leaves from a small tin. The domesticity of the scene was surreal. A human man making tea for an orc woman in the middle of the night as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Seraphine sat at the table and watched him work, noting the careful precision of his movements. "You do not have servants?" she asked. "Just the soldiers, and they have their own duties. I prefer to manage my own household." He poured the tea into 2 chipped cups and handed her one. "Besides, I like the quiet. It helps me think." Seraphine sipped the tea, savoring the warmth and the subtle floral taste. "What do you think about?" "Many things. The fort's supply situation, the political tensions between the human territories and the orc clans, whether I am doing enough to make a difference or if I am just one small man shouting into the wind." He smiled ruefully. "Heavy thoughts for a late night." "I have heavy thoughts of my own," Seraphine admitted. "I keep wondering what happens next. You have given me freedom, but what am I supposed to do with it? I have no skills that are valued in the human world. I cannot read or write fluently. I have no trade. I am strong, but so are many others. What use am I?" "You are underestimating yourself," Samuel said gently. "You survived capture, transport, and slavery. You endured treatment that would have broken many people. That takes a special kind of strength, Seraphine. Do not dismiss it. Strength does not pay for food or shelter." "No, but it is a foundation to build on. As for skills, you can learn. I can teach you to manage accounts and inventory. You can learn the basics of fortification and defense. You can study trade and negotiation. The question is not what use you are, but what you want to become." The idea was dizzying. What did she want to become? She had never considered it before. Her life had been mapped out from birth. She would marry, bear children, manage a household, and support her husband in his endeavors. It was the way of her people, the path all orc women followed. But that path was closed to her now, and the freedom to choose her own direction was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I do not know," she confessed. "I have never had to decide before." "Then take your time. There is no rush. You are safe here and you can figure out your future at your own pace." They talked long into the night, the conversation meandering from topic to topic. Samuel told her about his life, about growing up in a small farming community to the south and joining the military to escape the monotony of planting and harvesting. He spoke of battles fought on distant borders, of friends lost and lessons learned, and of the disillusionment that had set in when he realized the wars he fought served the ambitions of wealthy lords rather than any noble cause. He had requested a transfer to the frontier forts, seeking something quieter, something that felt less like complicity in injustice. Seraphine, in turn, told him about her childhood, about a father who had ruled with wisdom and compassion, and about the clan politics that had poisoned the village after his death. She spoke of her brothers, still young and idealistic, and of her hope that they would grow into better men than their stepfather. She talked about the arranged marriage that had ended, leaving her in limbo, neither maiden nor wife, and about the isolation she had felt in the months before her capture. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Samuel stood and stretched, his joints popping audibly. "I should try to get a few hours of sleep before the morning duties begin. You should rest as well." Seraphine nodded, but she was reluctant to leave. The conversation had felt like a lifeline, a connection to another person who saw her as she truly was. "Samuel," she said as she reached the door, "thank you. Not just for the freedom, but for this, for listening." "Any time," he said, and she believed him. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Seraphine rose early each morning and reported to Samuel for her duties. He taught her the basics of record keeping, showing her how to track supplies, document expenditures, and maintain inventories. She proved a quick study, her natural intelligence and determination compensating for her limited literacy. Samuel was patient with her mistakes, never angry or condescending, and she found herself working harder to please him than she ever had for anyone else. In the afternoons, she helped with the physical labor around the fort. She repaired fences, tended the small vegetable garden, and assisted the soldiers with maintenance tasks. The men were wary of her at first, their prejudices against orcs running deep, but Seraphine's work ethic and good humor gradually won them over. Within a few weeks, they treated her as one of their own, joking with her over meals and asking her opinion on various matters. But it was the evenings she treasured most. After the day's work was done, Samuel would invite her to his house for tea and conversation. They discussed everything from philosophy to agriculture to the ongoing tensions between their peoples. Samuel challenged her assumptions, and she challenged his in return, their debates growing more animated and enjoyable as they learned each other's rhythms. Seraphine found herself watching Samuel when he was not looking, noticing small details. The way he chewed his lip when concentrating, the habit he had of running his hand through his hair when frustrated, the rare full smile that appeared when something genuinely amused him. She told herself it was simple curiosity, a natural interest in the man who had saved her life. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She was developing feelings for him. The realization hit her one evening as they sat by the fire, Samuel reading aloud from a book of poetry while she mended a torn shirt. His voice washed over her, warm and familiar, and Seraphine felt a contentment so profound it frightened her. This was dangerous. Humans and orcs did not fall in love. Such unions were forbidden by the laws of both peoples, seen as abominations that diluted bloodlines and betrayed cultural identity. If anyone discovered her feelings, the consequences would be severe, and yet she could not stop herself. Every day, her affection deepened. She began to notice his presence in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude or friendship. Her pulse quickened when he smiled at her. Her skin tingled when their hands accidentally brushed while passing papers. She found excuses to linger in his company, hoarding moments like a dragon hoarded gold. Samuel, for his part, seemed oblivious. He treated her with the same kindness and respect he had from the beginning, his manner never straying toward anything improper. Seraphine told herself this was good, that it meant he saw her only as a colleague and friend. But a small, traitorous part of her wished he would see her as something more. Autumn deepened into winter, and the first snows began to fall. The fort prepared for the cold months ahead, stockpiling firewood and preserving food. Seraphine threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction it provided. But at night, alone in her small room, she could not escape her thoughts. She was falling in love with a man she could never have, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then one morning, a messenger arrived from her village. Seraphine was in the storehouse inventorying grain sacks when Samuel found her. His expression was serious, and her heart sank. "Bad news, then. Your brothers sent word," he said without preamble. "The clan elders have ruled in your stepfather's favor. The dowry is his to keep." "I am sorry, Seraphine." She had expected as much, but the confirmation still stung. "So that is it. The gold I was promised, the security my father set aside for me, all gone. There is something else." Samuel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Your stepfather has declared you clanless. You have been formally exiled from the village. Your brothers tried to fight it, but they were overruled." Clanless. The word was a death sentence in Orc society. Without a clan, she had no identity, no protection, no place in the world. She was an outcast, a ghost, someone who had ceased to exist in the eyes of her people. Seraphine felt the ground shift beneath her feet, her carefully constructed new life suddenly feeling fragile and temporary. "I see," she said, her voice flat. "Thank you for telling me. Seraphine, I need to be alone right now." She pushed past him and fled to her room, slamming the door behind her. She did not cry this time. Tears felt pointless, an indulgence she could not afford. Instead, she sat on her bed and stared at the wall, trying to process what this meant. She had known, on some level, that she could never return home. But having it stated so explicitly, having her exile formalized, made it real in a way she had not been prepared for. Hours passed. The light outside her window shifted from morning bright to afternoon gold. Finally, a soft knock came at the door. "Seraphine, it is me," Samuel's voice gentle and concerned. "May I come in? The door is not locked." He entered and sat beside her on the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "I am sorry. I know what the clan meant to you." "It does not matter," Seraphine said dully. "They made their choice, I will make mine." "And what choice is that?" She turned to look at him, taking in the worry etched across his features. "I will stay here, if you will have me. I know I said it was temporary, but I have nowhere else to go now. This is the closest thing I have to a home." "You are always welcome here," Samuel said firmly. "For as long as you want to stay. You are not alone, Seraphine. You have friends here. You have me." Something in the way he said "me" made her breath catch. She searched his face, looking for hidden meanings, but found only sincerity. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, the question that had haunted her since their first meeting. "You have done so much for me, and I have given you nothing in return. What do you get from this?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I get to be a better man than I was. Every day I see you working, thriving, becoming stronger. I feel like maybe I have done something worthwhile in this world. Maybe I have made one small thing right." "Is that all?" He looked up, and Seraphine saw something flicker in his eyes, an emotion quickly suppressed. What else would there be? She knew she should let it go, should accept his explanation and move on. But the rejection from her clan had left her reckless, desperate for something real and honest. "Do you ever think about me?" she asked. "When I am not here, do you wonder what I am doing? Do you look forward to our evenings together?" "Yes," Samuel admitted. "I do. You have become important to me, Seraphine, more important than you probably realize." "How important?" "Important enough that it scares me." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is not appropriate. You are under my protection, and I have no right to burden you with feelings you might not share." "What if I do share them?" The words escaped before Seraphine could stop them, and suddenly everything hung in the balance. What if I think about you constantly? What if I look for excuses to be near you? What if I have fallen in love with you, Samuel, despite every logical reason why I should not? The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel stood frozen, his back to her, and Seraphine felt panic rising. She had gone too far, revealed too much, destroyed the fragile friendship they had built. Then he turned, and the expression on his face stole her breath. It was raw and vulnerable, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," she whispered. "I mean it. I love you." Samuel crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've tried so hard not to, tried to be professional and appropriate, but I cannot help it. You are brave and strong and brilliant, and every day I spend with you makes me feel more alive than I have in years. I love you, Seraphine, and I am terrified of what that means." "It means we are both fools," Seraphine said, but she was smiling through tears. "Our peoples will never accept this. We will face persecution from both sides. It would be easier to deny these feelings and remain friends." "I am tired of choosing the easy path," Samuel said. "I have spent my whole life doing what was expected, following rules and keeping my head down. For once, I want to choose something because it makes me happy. Consequences be damned. If you will have me, Seraphine, I want to be with you. Not as employer and employee, not as friends, as partners, as lovers, as whatever we can make of this impossible situation." Seraphine cupped his face in her hands, feeling the roughness of stubble against her palms. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will have you. Whatever comes, we will face it together." He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. His lips were warm and gentle, and Seraphine felt something inside her that had been locked away for so long finally break free. This was what love felt like. Not the arranged marriage her father had planned, not duty or obligation, but genuine affection freely given and received. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "We should discuss the practicalities," he said, ever the pragmatist. "The soldiers will talk. Word will spread. We need to be prepared for the fallout." "Let them talk," Seraphine said fiercely. "I have been exiled by my clan and declared property by human slavers. I have nothing left to lose, Samuel. If loving you means facing more prejudice and hatred, then so be it. I am not afraid." "I am," he admitted. "I am afraid of what this will cost you. You have already lost so much, and I have gained so much more. I have my freedom. I have work that gives me purpose. I have you." She kissed him again, softer this time. "That is more than enough." They spent the rest of the evening planning. Samuel would make their relationship known gradually, starting with a few trusted soldiers and expanding from there. He would emphasize Seraphine's free status and her contributions to the fort, framing their relationship as a natural development rather than something scandalous. It would not stop the gossip, but it might mitigate the worst of it. As for Seraphine's housing, they agreed she should remain in her own quarters for now. Moving into Samuel's house immediately would only fuel rumors and resentment. They would take things slowly, let people adjust to the idea, and eventually, when the time felt right, they could make more permanent arrangements. Word spread quickly, as it always did in close quarters. Within days, every person at the fort knew that their commander was courting the orc woman. Reactions were mixed. Some of the soldiers were supportive, having grown to respect Seraphine and seeing no harm in their relationship. Others were horrified, viewing it as a betrayal of humanity and an insult to proper social order. A few made their displeasure known through cold glares and muttered comments, but Samuel dealt with any open hostility swiftly and firmly. The first real test came when a supply caravan arrived from a neighboring fort. The captain, a grizzled veteran named Marcus Thorne, took one look at Seraphine working alongside the men and demanded an explanation. "You are allowing an orc to operate freely in a military installation?" he asked Samuel incredulously. "And you are, what, courting her? Have you lost your mind?" "My personal life is my own business," Samuel replied coolly. "And Seraphine is a free woman and a valued member of this fort's staff. She has committed no crime and poses no threat. I will thank you to treat her with respect." "Respect? She is a savage. Her kind have killed hundreds of our people in border raids. How can you betray your own kind like this? If you have evidence that Seraphine personally participated in any raids, present it. Otherwise, you are judging her based on her race, and I will not tolerate that here." Marcus sputtered, clearly unused to being challenged. "The territorial governor will hear of this. Mark my words, Morgan, this will not go unanswered. Then I will answer to the governor when he asks. Until then, you will conduct your business and leave." The confrontation left Samuel shaken, though he tried to hide it. That evening, Seraphine found him sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "He was not wrong," Samuel said quietly. "The governor will hear of this and there will be consequences. I could lose my command. Worse, you could be arrested and deported, sent back to the orc territories without protection or resources." "Then we will deal with it," Seraphine said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "We knew this would not be easy. I never thought it would be this hard. I do not know what I thought. That people would be reasonable, I suppose. That love would be enough to change minds." "Love is enough," Seraphine insisted. "Not to change the world, perhaps, but to give us the strength to face it. We will find a way through this, Samuel, together." He squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her certainty. "You are the bravest person I have ever met." "No, I am just stubborn. There is a difference." They laughed together and the tension eased, but both knew that Marcus Thorne's threat was not idle. Trouble was coming, and they would need to be ready. The summons arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by an official courier bearing the territorial governor's seal. Samuel was ordered to report to the capital immediately to answer questions regarding his conduct at the fort. The letter was carefully worded, avoiding direct accusations, but the message was clear. Someone important was unhappy, and Samuel was being called to account. "I should come with you," Seraphine said when he told her. "No, it is too dangerous. If they decide to arrest you, I will not be able to protect you in the capital. You are safer here. And you will be safer if I am there to speak on my own behalf. I will not hide while you face punishment for loving me." They argued for hours, but Seraphine was immovable. Finally, Samuel relented, though he insisted on conditions. She would travel as his clerk, an official member of his staff with proper documentation to prove her free status. She would stay close to him at all times and avoid drawing attention. If things went badly, she would flee the city and return to the fort while Samuel handled the legal consequences. Seraphine agreed to his terms, though she had no intention of abandoning him if trouble arose. They made preparations to leave, entrusting the fort to Samuel's second-in-command, a steady soldier named Garrett who had been among the first to accept their relationship. Then they set out for the capital, a journey that would take 5 days by horse. The road was rough and the weather cold, but Seraphine found she enjoyed the travel. It was her first real freedom of movement in months, and despite the uncertainty of their destination, she felt a lightness of spirit she had not experienced since before her father's death. She and Samuel rode side by side, talking or simply enjoying companionable silence, and at night they camped beneath the stars, sharing a single bedroll for warmth. It was on the third night, lying wrapped in Samuel's arms beneath a sky full of stars, that Seraphine first dared to imagine a future. She saw herself and Samuel in a small house on the frontier, far from the politics and prejudices of civilization. There would be land to farm, maybe a few animals and children, half human and half orc, beautiful in their uniqueness. It was a dream, perhaps impossible, but it filled her with a hope that felt almost painful in its intensity. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "The future. Our future, if we are allowed to have one." "We will make our own future," he said with quiet determination. "No matter what the governor says or does, we will find a way. I promise you that." Seraphine turned in his arms to face him, memorizing the lines of his face in the firelight. "I love you," she said, the words still feeling new and precious. "I love you too. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." They kissed, and the rest of the night was lost to tenderness and passion, a reaffirmation of the bond that had formed between them. In the morning, they continued their journey with renewed resolve. The capital city was larger than Seraphine had imagined, a sprawling mass of buildings and people that made her head spin. She had never seen so many humans in one place, and their curious, often hostile stares made her skin prickle with unease. Samuel kept her close, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back as they navigated the crowded streets toward the governor's mansion. The building was imposing, 3 stories of stone and glass that screamed wealth and power. Guards in polished armor stood at the entrance, and they eyed Seraphine with open suspicion as Samuel presented his summons. After a tense moment, they were allowed to pass, escorted by a stiff-backed clerk to a waiting room furnished with uncomfortable chairs and faded tapestries. They waited for over an hour, tension mounting with each passing minute. Finally, the clerk returned and led them to a large office where the territorial governor sat behind an ornate desk. He was a man in his 50s, well-fed and prosperous-looking, with shrewd eyes and a calculating expression. "Commander Morgan," he said, not rising or offering any greeting. "I have received several complaints regarding your conduct at the frontier fort, serious complaints." "I am aware, sir. I am here to address them." "Very well. Let us begin with the most egregious. You have entered into a romantic relationship with an orc, in direct violation of social norms and professional standards. You have, in effect, legitimized an interspecies liaison that many view as dangerous and immoral. What do you have to say for yourself?" Samuel stood straighter, his voice steady. "With respect, sir, I have violated no laws. Seraphine is a free woman, a documented citizen with manumission papers properly filed and notarized. My personal relationship with her is not subject to military regulation or territorial law. As for social norms, I acknowledge that our relationship challenges them, but I do not believe that love between consenting adults should be constrained by prejudice." "Love," the governor repeated with distaste. "You claim to love this creature." "I do, and she is not a creature. She is a person, intelligent and capable, who has contributed significantly to the fort's operations since her arrival." The governor turned his attention to Seraphine, studying her with cold appraisal. "You are the orc in question. Tell me, what is your intent with Commander Morgan? Do you seek to exploit his position for your own gain?" Seraphine met his gaze without flinching. "I seek only to live my life in peace and love the man who saved me from slavery. I have no political agenda, no hidden motives. Samuel risked everything to give me freedom, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." Pretty words, but orcs are known for their cunning and deceit. How do I know you are not manipulating him? You do not, Seraphine said bluntly. You can only judge me by my actions. I have worked honestly at the fort, contributing to its welfare and causing no trouble. I have broken no laws and harmed no one. If my love for Samuel is a crime, then I stand guilty, but I will not apologize for it. The governor leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Commander Morgan, your service record is exemplary. You have led with distinction and earned the respect of your peers. That is why I am inclined to give you an opportunity to correct this mistake. End your relationship with the orc, send her away from the fort, and I will overlook this incident. You may return to your post with no official reprimand. Samuel's jaw tightened. And if I refuse, then I will have no choice but to relieve you of your command. You will be discharged from service and forfeit your pension. Furthermore, the orc's status will be reviewed, and if any irregularities are found in her manumission, she will be subject to deportation or re-enslavement. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Seraphine felt her heart hammering in her chest. This was it, the moment that would determine their future. She wanted to speak, to tell Samuel to agree to save his career and his security. But before she could open her mouth, Samuel spoke. Then you leave me no choice, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. I will not end my relationship with Seraphine. She is the woman I love, and I will not betray her to appease prejudice and fear. If that costs me my commission, so be it. I would rather be an honorable man without rank than a coward with authority. The governor's expression darkened. You are making a grave mistake, Morgan. Think carefully about what you are throwing away. I have thought about it, Samuel said. Every day since I met Seraphine, I have thought about what loving her might cost. I accept those costs. My only regret is that the world is not ready to accept what we have. So be it. The governor waved a hand dismissively. You are hereby discharged from service, effective immediately. You have 48 hours to vacate the fort and remove all personal possessions. As for the orc, her papers will be reviewed by the magistrate. If they are found to be in order, she will be allowed to remain in the territory, but she will be monitored closely. Understood, sir. Samuel saluted sharply, a final act of military courtesy, then turned and walked out. Seraphine followed, her mind reeling. They did not speak until they were outside the mansion, standing on the bustling street amid the noise and chaos of the city. Then Samuel let out a long breath and turned to her with a rueful smile. Well, that went about as badly as it could have. You just gave up everything, Seraphine said, her voice shaking. Your career, your income, your future for me. No, Samuel corrected gently. I chose love over fear. I chose a future with you over a life of regret and compromise. That is not giving up everything. That is gaining what matters most. Tears spilled down Seraphine's cheeks. You are a fool, probably, but I am your fool if you will still have me. She laughed through her tears and threw her arms around him, not caring about the stares of passers-by. Yes, I will have you. Always. They held each other for a long moment, drawing strength from their embrace. Then Samuel pulled back, his expression turning practical. We need to leave the city and return to the fort. We have 2 days to pack our things and figure out where we are going. Where can we go? You have no position, no income. I have no clan. We are both outcasts now. Then we will build something new. There is unclaimed land in the Western Territories, far from the cities and the politics. We can homestead, start a farm or a ranch. It will be hard work, but we are both used to that. And we will be together, which is all that matters. The plan was ambitious, perhaps even reckless, but Seraphine found herself nodding. What other choice did they have? They could not stay in the settled territories where prejudice would poison every interaction. Their only hope was to strike out on their own, to find a place where they could live freely without judgment. The The journey back to the fort was somber but determined. Samuel broke the news to Garrett, who accepted it with stoic grace and promised to help with the transition. The other soldiers reacted with a mix of sympathy and resignation. Some expressed admiration for Samuel's principles, while others thought he had made a foolish choice. But all of them helped as Samuel and Seraphine sorted through their possessions and prepared to leave. On their last night at the fort, Samuel gathered everyone in the courtyard. "I want to thank you all for your service and your support," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the cold evening air. "I am leaving because I believe in something bigger than duty or rank. I believe in the right to love freely and live honestly. I hope that someday the world will catch up to that ideal. Until then, I wish you all the best." The soldiers applauded, some enthusiastically, others with more restraint. Garrett stepped forward and clasped Samuel's hand. "You are a good man, Morgan. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you, my friend. Take care of the fort." The next morning, Samuel and Seraphine loaded their belongings onto a wagon and set out westward. They had enough supplies to last several weeks, tools for building and farming, and a small amount of money Samuel had saved over the years. It was not much, but it was a start. The journey took nearly a month, traveling through increasingly remote terrain until they reached the edge of the settled territories. Here, the land was wild and unclaimed, rolling hills covered in forests and meadows. Samuel found a spot near a stream with good soil and plentiful timber, and they decided to make it their home. Building the homestead was backbreaking work. They felled trees and hauled logs, dug a foundation and raised walls, crafted a roof from bark and branches. Seraphine's orcish strength proved invaluable, and Samuel's military discipline kept them organized and efficient. Slowly, a small cabin took shape, rough but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and a loft for sleeping. They planted a garden, cleared land for crops, and built a small barn for the livestock they hoped to acquire. Every day brought new challenges: wild animals, harsh weather, injuries, and exhaustion. But they faced each obstacle together, their bond growing stronger with every shared hardship. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the land in snow and testing their preparations. They huddled by the fire in their cabin, rationing supplies and hoping they had done enough to survive until spring. There were moments of doubt, times when Seraphine wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But then she would look at Samuel, his face illuminated by firelight, and know that this, right here, was worth any struggle. One particularly cold night, as they lay in their loft wrapped in every blanket they owned, Samuel spoke quietly. "Do you regret it? Leaving civilization behind, coming out here to the middle of nowhere?" "No," Seraphine said without hesitation. "Do you?" "Not for a moment. I have never been happier than I am here with you." "Good. Because I intend to spend the rest of my life with you, Samuel Morgan, and I do not want you having second thoughts." He laughed and pulled her closer. "No second thoughts, only forward from here." Spring came eventually, bringing warmer temperatures and the promise of growth. They planted their fields with seed Samuel had carefully preserved, and tended the garden that had survived the winter beneath its blanket of mulch. Green shoots appeared, then stalks, then the first tender vegetables. It was a small harvest, but it was theirs, grown by their own hands on land they had claimed together. As summer arrived, they received their first visitors. A group of orc hunters, members of a small clan that roamed the western territories, stumbled upon their homestead. Seraphine expected hostility, but the orcs were curious rather than aggressive. They had heard rumors of an orc woman living with a human man and wanted to see if it was true. The clan's leader, a weathered orc woman named Grishka, questioned Seraphine extensively. You were exiled from your birth clan. Yes, my stepfather declared me clanless after my father died. And this human, he is your mate, he is. Grishka studied Samuel, who stood protectively beside Seraphine, then nodded slowly. It is unusual but not unheard of. In the old times, before the wars, there were unions between our peoples. The elders say some of the greatest heroes carried blood from both sides. Perhaps you are returning to that tradition. I do not care about tradition, Seraphine said. I care about building a life with the man I love. Then you have our blessing for what it is worth. If you ever need allies or wish to trade, our clan camps 3 days north of here during the summer months. You would be welcome. The encounter left Seraphine stunned. She had not expected acceptance, especially from other orcs. But Grishka's clan was different from her birth clan, less rigid and more pragmatic. They judged people by their actions rather than their heritage, and they saw nothing wrong with Seraphine's choices. Over the following months, other travelers passed through. Some were friendly, others wary, but word spread that the homestead was a safe place for those who did not fit the mold of mainstream society. A half-orc smith running from persecution in the human lands. A human herbalist who had been exiled for practicing what her village called witchcraft. A pair of refugees from a border war who simply wanted peace. One by one they arrived, and Samuel and Seraphine welcomed them, offering food, shelter, and acceptance. Before they knew it, a small community had formed around their homestead. They built more cabins, expanded the fields, and established trade relationships with both orc clans and human settlements. It was not easy, and there were still those who viewed them with suspicion or outright hostility. But within their little corner of the world, they had created something unique. A place where people of all races and backgrounds could live together without fear or prejudice. 2 years after leaving the fort, on a warm summer evening, Samuel proposed properly. He had crafted a ring from silver he had traded for, set with a small green stone that reminded him of Seraphine's skin. He knelt before her in the garden they had planted together and asked her to be his wife. Seraphine did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. 1,000 times yes. They were married a month later in a ceremony that blended both human and orc traditions. Grishka's clan attended, along with the members of their growing community. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and speeches that celebrated not just the union of two people but the possibility of a better world. As Seraphine stood beside Samuel, their hands clasped together, she thought back to that terrible day when she had been caged and desperate, offering her dowry for freedom. Samuel had refused the gold and opened the gate anyway, asking nothing in return. At the time, she had not understood why. But now she knew. He had seen her, truly seen her, not as property or a savage or a political statement, but as a person deserving of dignity and freedom. That recognition had been the seed from which everything else had grown. Years passed, and their community flourished. Children were born, the first generation to grow up without the prejudices that had divided their parents. Seraphine and Samuel's own children, 2 daughters and a son, were beautiful blends of both their heritages, strong and clever and full of joy. They learned to farm and hunt, to read and write, to see the world not as a collection of separate peoples, but as a tapestry of individuals, each with their own story. Samuel often joked that he had traded a military commission for a life of hard labor and dirty diapers, but no one who saw him ever doubted he had made the right choice. He was happy in a way he had never been before, his days filled with purpose, and his nights with love. Seraphine, for her part, marveled at how far she had come. From a caged slave to a free woman, from an exile to the heart of a thriving community, from a person who had nothing to someone who had everything that mattered. She had found love, built a home, and created a family. And it had all started with a single act of kindness from a man who refused to look away from injustice. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, Samuel and Seraphine would sit on the porch of their cabin and watch the sun set over the hills. They did not need to speak. After so many years together, they could communicate in silence, a touch of hands or a shared glance saying more than words ever could. But sometimes, Samuel would break the comfortable quiet with a question. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had taken your dowry, if I had held you to that debt?" "I do not wonder," Seraphine would reply, "because you did not take it. You saw me as a person, not a transaction. That is the difference between you and every other man I have known. That is why I love you. I love you too. And I would make the same choice again, 100 times over. I know." They would sit in companionable silence then, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from nothing but love and determination. The world outside their homestead still struggled with prejudice and fear, still fought wars over differences that should have been celebrated. But here, in this small corner of the Western Territories, Samuel and Seraphine had proven that another way was possible. Their story spread, carried by traders and travelers, told and retold until it became something of a legend. The human commander who had given up everything for an orc woman. The orc bride who had offered her dowry for freedom and found love instead. It inspired some, angered others, but it could not be ignored. And years later, when Samuel and Seraphine were old and their children were grown with families of their own, they would look at the thriving community around them and know that they had succeeded in the most important way. They had not changed the world, perhaps, but they had changed their corner of it. They had shown that love could bridge any divide, that courage and kindness mattered more than tradition or prejudice. On Samuel's last day, as he lay in the bed they had shared for decades, Seraphine held his hand and whispered the words that had defined their life together. "You opened the gate for me when I had nothing to offer. You gave me freedom and asked for nothing in return. Everything I am, everything we built started with that one act of grace." Samuel smiled, his eyes bright despite his failing body. "You had plenty to offer. You just did not see it yet. I simply gave you the chance to discover it for yourself. We had a good life, did we not? The best life. I would not change a single moment." He died peacefully that evening, surrounded by family, his hand still clasped in Seraphine's. She mourned him deeply, the grief a physical weight on her chest, but she did not regret. Their time together had been a gift, every day a blessing she had never expected to receive. Seraphine lived several more years, watching her grandchildren grow and continuing to guide the community she and Samuel had built. When her own time came, she died in the same bed where Samuel had passed, content and fulfilled. The community did not fade after their deaths. Instead, it grew stronger, a testament to the foundation they had laid. The children and grandchildren of that first generation carried forward the lessons their elders had taught them. That people should be judged by their character rather than their race, that love was stronger than hate, and that one act of kindness could change the world. The small homestead became a village, then a town, a place known throughout the territories as a haven for those seeking acceptance and peace. And at its heart, in the center of the main square, stood a monument. It was simple, just a stone marker engraved with 2 names and a single sentence that captured everything they had meant to each other and to the world they had helped create. She offered her dowry for freedom. He refused the gold and opened the gate anyway. From that choice, love and hope grew. People came from far and wide to see it, to hear the story, and to remember that change begins not with grand gestures or sweeping laws, but with individual choices made by ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice. Samuel and Seraphine had been two such people, and their legacy would endure for generations, a reminder that love, in the end, was always worth fighting for,